Peter, good to have you with us again. This time we're going to be discussing a question that really everyone will have to answer at some point. You've called it the Peter question. I think there's another name we could call it. What do people say? Who do people say Jesus is? Am I right?
Yeah, George, you're absolutely right. Yeah, I tend to call this the Peter question. First thing to say is my name happens to be Peter, right? But it's nothing to do with me.
Right.
But you'll recall, George, that Jesus asked his disciples as a group, who do people say that I am? But it was only Peter that answered. So if you're happy, I'll maybe begin with a few verses from the Gospel of Luke. And it's Luke chapter 9, and I'm beginning at verse 18 through to 21. Jesus was praying in private, and his disciples were with him. He asked them, "Who do the crowds say I am?" They replied, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others that one of the prophets of long ago has come back to life." "But what about you?" he asked. "Who do you say I am?" Peter answered, "The Messiah of God." Jesus strictly warned them not to tell this to anyone, and he said, "The Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders, chief priests, and teachers of the law, and he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." So Jesus asked the question. I imagine there was probably a big pause before anybody said anything, but the person who responded was Peter, and he responded correctly.
Indeed.
In one of the other Gospels, I think it's Matthew, Jesus says in addition to this that the Spirit has revealed this to you. This wasn't revealed to you by men. So Jesus was, in that sense, acknowledging the fact that Peter himself had come on in his understanding and was now understanding who Jesus is. So, George, I would say then really that this is the evergreen question. It's a question that's not going to go away.
Right.
In the sense that Jesus asked that question, 2,000 years ago? But in a sense, he's still asking the very same question today. And sooner or later, everybody has to answer that question one way or another. Now, you can perhaps answer a question by trying to avoid it, by trying to run away from it. But nevertheless, the question doesn't go away. Who do you say that I am? Do we say, yes, Jesus is who he claimed to be, who Peter identified him as, the Messiah of God? Or do we say, no, he isn't? And you may recall a famous line from one of the films, I think it was Top Gun, you can run, but you can't hide. And I think a lot of people perhaps in life, as regards Jesus, are running away from the question, running away from trying to understand who Jesus is and to really get to grips with that. But ultimately, you can't hide from it, because sooner or later, you have to answer that question.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. So you're making clear that the question is, who do people say that Jesus is? And that's the Peter question in inverted commas.
Yes.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. So Peter said he was the Messiah. We understand biblically that in first century Israel, the Israelites were looking for a Messiah. What kind of Messiah do you think they were looking for?
Good question. Well, in this, George, I think we can be pretty clear that the Israelites of that time were expecting, many of them, particularly the religious ones, were expecting that the Messiah was going to come. But they had very much in their minds, and we get an indication of that certainly in the Bible, but also in other writings outside of the Bible, that the clear expectation was that this would be the son of David, which we would say as Christians, ultimately Jesus is the son of David. But that this would be a king who would elevate Israel back to the status that it originally had under King David, when Israel's power was at its height, at its zenith, you could say. So that's what they were expecting. They were expecting a ruler, a political ruler, and a conqueror, someone who would overcome the Romans who were in charge of Israel at that time and push them out. So a military leader
man, yeah.
and a military king. So that's what they were expecting.
So interesting that you say that. So then you've probably answered this already. So Peter, calling Jesus the Messiah, is gone away from that expectation to a military leader, to a king, a ruler. He was saying Jesus was the Messiah. And his understanding of Jesus as the Messiah was perhaps different to what the Jews were expecting. So, as you said, probably a divine intervention, divine revelation to Peter.
I think the disciples went on struggling with what this actually meant in practice, almost up until the end. But nevertheless, Peter had recognised this is the Messiah. What that Messiah was, and the fact that he wasn't the military king or the political king that they were expecting, rather he is a saviour. And then we go on to discuss, what is he saving us from? What is he saving us to? That was still a lesson that they had to learn.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you very much.
Okay, George, thank you.
Thank you.